a portion of this is speculative, but hopefully I'm at least making some observations that most don't. Feel free to disagree. Since a young age, I've noticed some disparities between what is being, said is going on versus what seems to be observed to be happening. If there is a ailment to civilization, it's that it's based upon a chain of assumptions, a vast majority of which are false assumptions. Not just in the recent past, but going back centuries, if not even thousands of years. But of recent note, some of the things that's kind of caused this strange new paradigm to emerge in how humans are viewing themselves and our place in affairs of the planet and all that kind of stuff, stems from something I had observed as a kid, which was this strange conflict that was kind of being promoted, that there's a science versus religion kind of element to which side is going to define reality for people, for I guess in large part for government policy in particular, being of interest to those who want to have their view of things on the scale of power. However, like that, I always felt there was something wrong with that. And as I got older and thought about it more, I think a lot of my issue with that is like, like a lot of early science was, started by or sponsored by like the church in particular. And so it's weird that, all these centuries later, they'd be so like up in arms about their own discipline. But in many ways, like the framing is wrong. It's science is against magic. Science is also derived from magic. Science kind of is magic, but it's magic for the masses. Magic is just an unknown power, whereas science is knowledge about power. So, many of the other scientific disciplines, like very core old ones like chemistry and, astrophysics and stuff, all trace back to stuff like astrology and alchemy. And very literally, those people who used to practice those crafts at some point, because of people like Sir Francis Bacon, started to, exchange their notes instead of going to the grave with their notes. The idea of the wizard and his apprentice is a kind of a cultural icon that reflects how things used to be, where people like Archimedes, weren't teaching entire classes how to build all the weird shit he was building. People who knew a lot of stuff were highly competitive with each other because it was a way for them to make a living, and so allowing everyone to do these things, was a kind of a big no-no. The reason why ancient Greece and Rome never had an industrial steam age, even though they had all the technological pieces to do it, is because they were being used by temple charlatans to create the illusion of opening doors and music from the god statues and all that kind of stuff that they used to build. It was all just using basic tricks that we all now consider to be stuff that we use for clockworks and toys and little steam trains and shit like that. We are still very much a steam society. We're just not as obvious about it. And they could have been too, but these secrets were held because, they don't want the common masses to know and recognize these things when they see them. They want it to be mysterious to average people who have no idea what's going on. People used to live in a very omenistic and poetic world. Speaking of, look back at how human beings used to write. I feel like that is fairly clear to say. It's not that they were wrong or even deluded in a way. That was just the basis of their knowledge of things. For they had emerged raw from the wilderness at some point. We all, and we are still on that chain. It's just at some point we did start to kind of have an awakening as science became shared. And as more and more people were able to become magicians and be able to understand engineering and astrophysics and chemistry. And thanks to the church, biology. It's kind of ironic that it was, Catholic monks that, started us on the path of genetic science because of, the whole like interbreeding different strains of beans together or wherever the fuck it was. And, leading up to theories of evolution that, then the church, decried as being some terrible affront, to their mythologized, version of the past. This debate carried through for a long time. There is a period back when George Bush II was in office that there's an intense, debate about whether or not to teach intelligent design in classes, which at the time I already saw as a sign that Christianity had kind of lost the argument there. They made a mistake of trying to frame themselves against science because religion isn't about magic. Religion is about politics. Religion and politics are framed against each other. There's a reason why we separated the two. Long time ago, if you look at the most basic emergent kind of city civilizations, the people who ruled them were god kings, god emperors, and the priesthood and temples were all built originally to support them. Now, as generations went on, after all these original people died, they became more and more framed as literal gods. But even up to the times of Augustus and Claudius, they were still, literally, saying like this Roman emperor is going to be a god. He's going to be arrayed amongst the gods and all that kind of stuff up until the end of paganism. It's traceable and observable within our history and storytelling what the fuck has been going on. Religion and politics compete over the exact same thing. They both want to set the laws for the land and for the people to abide by, and they also want to collect money for the honor of doing so. As after the initial, God Emperor that started the whole ball rolling for whatever city civilization first emerged, died, eventually there would start to be schisms between the ruling family and, the temple structure, whatever kind of clerical order arose to support them. They would become more and more divided over time, and unfortunately for religion, government is based upon military power, at least for, citified agricultural imperial style civilization. That rift has not ended well for them in the long term. There's been times, obviously, where religion has tried to reassert its dominance. There's certainly been periods of time where, various governments had to be sanctioned by the, whoever was at the head of the church and all that kind of stuff. But, still in the end, might makes right, as they say. And modern governments, even in modern democratic and or communist times, they're still based upon, their military authority. They do not derive their powers by sanction of the gods or by ancient tradition or any of that kind of shit, even if they might try to say they are in the aftermath. Because religion up till recently was still, kind of in control of the basic paradigm that the population that these government entities had to rely upon, either to, work as them as serfs and or vote for them as serfs, and work for each other. What a great alternative. But, religion just had to pick the stupid fight with science because it just felt like somehow offended that Darwinism and the idea of evolution was undermining them. But the fact that they had gotten to a point where they were already willing to say that evolution was real, but God made it happen, was already a sign that they had lost the argument. But they still try to make that one final push during the Bush years, and it all culminated with one great televised moment. The moment where Christianity died, when Bill Nye and Ken Ham had that stupid debate. And public opinion did come out that Bill Nye won. So, congratulations, Christianity was murdered by Bill Nye. Now, obviously Christianity has lived on, but its spirit has been kind of punched out of it, and it doesn't seem to really know what to do with itself anymore. I feel that's kind of part of the problem with what's emerged in the years since this has happened. Since then, we've had this kind of new secular Gaianist kind of phenomenon, as I like to describe it, start to kind of replace that void for a morality framework that Christianity had provided for civilization, and it has kind of veered us off into a different trajectory. The traditions and history that you assume to be in your past does somewhat dictate how you're navigating yourself forward through time. And so by detaching ourselves from a certain set of narratives, that did dramatically alter the trajectory for civilization. And that's probably a chunk of what a lot of people sense that bothers them about things, more so than any individual change. But with the science versus religion debate sundered, what has emerged in its place is, largely, government has won because government is more allied with science during the whole process of the science versus religion debate. And so, science as the new priesthood props up, the new rulership, as always been. And so by jumping around the mythologized version of things, we've kind of had a way to, I don't know how to describe it, like the separation of church and state doesn't apply if it's a church that's grounded upon scientific principles, kind of a thing, I guess you could say. And it's kind of like you could describe it as a true emergent technocracy. It's still in its infancy and could easily be snuffed out. It is dependent upon its own chain of really bad assumptions in its own right. But kind of in place of the debate for science and religion, we've now kind of developed this thing about the 4-quadrant political compass, where you got, the authoritarian versus libertarian as your up-down axis, and then you have left and right, which, according to that, fall right on the authoritarian libertarian line, slightly on the side of libertarianism, but not by a heavy margin, and I'm slid all the way over to the left side of that spectrum. However, I noticed while taking those compass tests that they don't necessarily give anything close to what my answer would be to those questions, and I also question the questions they are asking, kind of a thing. So, from the get-go, after having experienced them, I question the validity of the 4-quad compass. I've come to also somewhat question the validity of the left-right paradigm entirely. I think too much stuff has been shed out and declared as being to the right of left, because the left, if you were to view it as a line going from left to right, that probably doesn't look right to you, left to right, at the left and side it frays apart, and each little line of that kind of manifests in a different form. Liberal democracies is a form of leftism. Communism is a form of leftism. Democratic socialism is a form of, leftism. Imperialism is a form of leftism. A lot of things, like most of the governments that we currently kind of are arguing amongst as to which one's the better than the other one, are all kind of forms of leftism in one degree or the other. At the other end of that spectrum, at the right tip, it comes down, instead of fraying apart, it comes to a very fine point. And that fine point is returning back to that essential source where religion and politics refuse together as one, where you have a feudalized theocracy. And there are a few of those on that planet, and they are the ones that generally get left out of things the most, if you happen to notice. I feel in the end, what we're coming up towards is that we're entering a period that, because of our internet technology, I don't know, like Homeland Security kind of did it because of all the money they dumped into security analysis back in the late 2000s and during the Obama administration. But we've reached a point, actually about a decade or so ago, where we're suffering from information overload. There is too much stuff going on for any one human being to possibly absorb anything close to all of it. Or, you're lucky if you can keep track of 5% of world events in your head and truly be able to calculate what's going on based on those things. It's an impossible situation. It's why we're more and more desperate to like try to force AI into existence. I still feel like the flaw of the Matrix movies or the Terminator is that like human beings aren't going to have to be forced under robotic control or under the rule of AI. They're not going to have to war against us. I quite feel that we are quite willing and desperate to abdicate responsibility for all this shit onto something else, and it's kind of to a point where only an actual AI, if we could ever build one, and I'm not talking about just sorting algorithms that we currently call AI, but an actual true intelligent computerized entity. Like only such a being could conceivably like sort and manage all this information that we got going on. Since that's always 10 years in the distance and has been for 40 years now, if not longer, I don't have a whole lot of hope that that's going to come into being. And so eventually information overload and the Hydra not being willing to see that it's a Hydra. It just thinks every other head that it's going against is at the right wing, and it can't see its own tail. In a way, the right wing, the right end of the spectrum is the tail of the Hydra. And the Hydra's heads are all spread out around and attacking each other at the top. And so they can't really see beneath themselves what the actual right wing is. To them, they're all at the top, at the point of, they are all the end point of the left from their point of view. And so they're not able to see each other as also being end points of the left. It's a blind spot. I think between that and the information overload, it's going to cause us, and it is causing us to basically slide into a new kind of feudal theocracy in the form of a feudal technocracy, where we're making a fusion of feminist politics, green ecological policies in place of veneration of the Earth Mother, women as avatars of the mother. Hence the whole fact that it's considered, and it's long been considered to be like more of a crime to hurt a female than a male and all that kind of stuff, because females are more sacrosanct because they are closer to the divine goddess kind of thinking, which even when we weren't thinking that way, we were still actually thinking that way. It's hardly like a new thing for us. In many ways, it's a back to the primitive kind of mentality. We still have original sin. We have a couple different original sins. You can pick and choose which one you want to feel guilty about. Guilt keeps people fed into the system of belief. Hence the fact, just using the Catholic Church as the example, if you're not a sinner, you got no reason to show up for confession now, do you? Kind of a thing. Or how Buddhism teaches people about reincarnation so that and there's a hope that one day they might realize that there's no such thing as reincarnation. Is that poisonous, or is this a rare anthropological moment where we can actually observe one of these things coming into creation and what's really actually happening, as opposed to what it says about itself 2,000 years later? That the birth of a new religion is an emergent phenomenon and really has nothing at all to do with whoever they decide to frame it around 500 years later. So, who knows? It could all be lies. I could all be wrong. Be sure to leave very thoughtful and friendly comments based on all these things I've said in the comments below, and things. Stay waspinated.